Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Destination Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Stoker. We've got a really interesting show for you today. I have a new friend that reached out, and anytime I get outreach from international destinations, I know it's going to be an interesting conversation, but this one is especially unique, and you'll find out why throughout the course of our discussion today. But I've got a new friend of mine. His name is Kairat. And Kairat, I'd love to have you say your last name so that I don't mess it up. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and your role with Kazakhstan Tourism.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So my name is Kairat Sadvakassov. That's my last name, and I'm the CEO of Kazakh Tourism, which is the national tourism organization, or the DMO for Kazakhstan as a country.
Perfect. Yeah, and for me, I definitely had to kind of go remind myself of exactly where Kazakhstan was on a map when when we started our conversation. And I think part of your goal is to make sure that more people know just inherently where Kazakhstan is on a map, and to get more tourism to the country of Kazakhstan. And I want to talk about that, but before we do, I have a couple of questions that I like to ask everybody that comes on the show to get to know them a little bit. So to start, Kairat, for you, I'd love to know your dream destination. And it's interesting because I also wonder if, since you're on the other side of the world from us here,
Right.
when I say us, me, but you're on the other side of the world, what destinations do you aspire to visit someday that you haven't had the chance to get to yet?
Definitely Australia. I think that's one of the dream destinations for many, and it's been on my bucket list for quite a long time, and I never got a chance to get there. But I'm really attracted to wildlife, to culinary. It turns out that culinary is one of the things that attract people to visit that continent and that country. So yeah, Australia.
Australia. Australia has been a popular answer on this show, and that's
Really.
interesting to me since you're in a different part of the world, but Australia has a lot of intrigue, right? They've got the outdoor opportunities, and it's such a small. When I say small, the population compared to the size of the country is very small. And there's a pretty big variety of things to do. The thing that scares me about Australia is there's so many things in Australia that can kill you.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. And the reason I'm attracted to Australia, I just want to go there and see how a country that is also in top five least densest countries in the world, just like Kazakhstan or Mongolia or Canada. So want to see how people make it out there.
Yeah, I think it would be amazing. It's definitely on my list as well. I think that's a good answer. What about a travel memory that you have? Something that stands out from going on a trip, and it could be from your childhood, it could be from when you're an adult, but I'd love to hear a travel memory you have.
Well, one of the things that immediately popped up to me when you said about the geography of Kazakhstan, my first ever trip abroad and to the United States. So my first foreign destination was the United States. I came there in early 2000, yes, and there was a map. I used to work as a camp counselor in one of the YMCA camps. There was a huge map, world map, in a dining hall, and parents and kids would come to me and ask me to point Kazakhstan, and of course they would be asking where Kazakhstan was. So my answer was, it's between Russia and China, to make it more obvious, I guess. And then I approached the map, and I've never seen this kind of map when the United States is right in the center, and you have two continents. I mean, the whole continent of Eurasia is split. So you have half Kazakhstan here, half Kazakhstan there. And so was Russia. It was quite interesting. But speaking of later travels, my most recent trip that would be quite a rare continent for me to visit. It was in South America, in Colombia. So had no idea what to expect, and it was a great trip overall, both in terms of people, the experiences, the food. Of course, there were a lot of myths that trace back to the recent history the country is not really happy or proud of, and it was interesting to see how people are transitioning from that image and trying to find a new path. And definitely tourism is one of their strong sides of the economy they're relying on.
So what you're saying then is that the image that's been portrayed to us through cinema and other things, it's not like you go down there and you've got the I guess legacy of Pablo Escobar out there, and it's just the country run by cartels or anything like that. It's a very different experience than we're told in the movies.
It is. It's definitely different. More to say, when you name this person or people get to name Pablo Escobar, they kind of hush themselves. They lower their voice. They go like, "Oh, this movie about Pablo Escobar," and then they carry on raising their voice back to normal. They're very interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
Awesome. And so tell me just one thing that you did while you were in Colombia that stands out to you.
While visiting the favelas, and it was interesting how the local government, of course, with the help of international donors, approached in their, I guess, strive to integrate the favelas with the city, building this cable cars. So people now with cable cars can get to the nearest metro station in order to get to work in no time, 20 minutes probably. Whereas in the past, it would take them forever to get from the up, because all these favelas are in the foothills, almost outside of Bogota, let's say, or Medellin. And then the buses wouldn't go straight down. They would have to kind of traverse, zigzagging all the way down. That would take probably 2.5 hours. And of course, those people will be late for their work in the morning, and then got fired and go into criminal kind of activity again. So that was a very smart choice. And how they painted all those houses, how the government distributed paints, intentionally different colors. So the whole thing from the cable car looks awesome, all colored with this nice workout zones and playgrounds and so on. The whole thing was revitalized completely.
Oh, how cool. That would be amazing to see. Interesting. Well, so I've never been to Colombia, but I spent 2 years in Brazil and spent some time near and in the favelas of Brazil. And it's hard to describe unless you see it in person, right? It's a very unique thing to witness.
Exactly.
And it's really interesting to hear what Colombia has done to kind of help change the dynamics of the favelas and give people more access to employment, because it was kind of this self-perpetuating problem if they couldn't get to work, and it was harder and harder for them to get to work. It sounds like Colombia has done some great work around their favelas.
Absolutely.
Well, Kairat, I'd love to have you give us just a little bit of your background and what led you to become the CEO of Kazakh Tourism, and now influencing visitation for an entire country. Tell me about your journey.
Well, most of the time I spent in tourism. My first degree, my bachelor's, was in tourism and hotel management from a local school here in Kazakhstan. I was inspired by the shift of the capital. So the capital moved early in 1997, so early years of our independence, when the USSR collapsed and each of the countries started kind of looking for their own path. And then the government decided to move the capital from the very south to the almost very north of Kazakhstan. And we saw the shift of the foreign embassies, for instance, or different corporations started arriving. So I kind of felt that that would be interesting, to work with all those foreigners. So I applied to the School of Hospitality and Tourism, and after I graduated, I worked in different sectors of tourism, hotel, travel agency. I did a little bit of international exchange programs, sending kids to work and study programs to the States, to the United Kingdom, South Africa, and so on. But then I applied for a so-called presidential scholarship, which would cover full tuition and housing and books and everything to study in top universities around the world. So that's one of the programs that is still on here in Kazakhstan, and it's been here since the independence for almost more than 30 years now, with about probably 13,000 people who went through this very cool program. And I went to New York University, and I did my master's in tourism management. It was more of a global program, and there was a bond. I had to work for government for the next 5 years after graduating. It was a pretty cool experience. I worked in different ministries and pursuing different projects, worked in investment. I was the co-author of the strategic documents and different legal acts for tourism development inducement. And 5 years passed, and I decided to carry on. So this year, it's been 12 years in public sector and 8 years in this company.
Great. Can I ask you a quick question on that then? Because I think that's an interesting arrangement. So the government of Kazakhstan has a program where they will sponsor you essentially to be able to go get a really high quality education in another country, with the expectation that you bring what you learned back and help the country to bring the knowledge that you got and apply it into the government. Is that a fair kind of summary of their program?
Absolutely, that is correct. And the number of schools actually started from 100, and it's actually not increasing much because the government essentially wants you to pursue your master's in top universities. Moreover, it used to be both master's and bachelor degree programs that the government would cover, but now it's only master's and PhD and short-term internship programs as well.
Interesting. So I guess that leads me to a question that, I don't know, here in the United States, because there's such a large population and it's a large country, I think it's difficult for some of us to feel like we're having a massive impact on the success or failure or direction of the United States of America, right? And so I'm curious what it's like for you from I don't know, as a citizen of Kazakhstan, to be able to have such an important impact on the economy and the future and the ability for Kazakhstan to even change its perception around the world. I think that sounds like a little bit of a heavy responsibility, right? Like a challenge to make sure there's a lot of pressure, I guess, to do a good job. But also it's got to be pretty rewarding when you see impact and change that affects the future of your country.
It is truly rewarding because for the last 12 years, I've been on top of almost everything that happened to tourism development in Kazakhstan, starting from introducing visa-free, like visa waiver program, and then expanding it. So we started with 14 countries only as a pilot in 2014. We're now at 83 countries that can come to Kazakhstan without visa. So anything from visa to infrastructure to policy overall, state support measures, marketing, and so on. So it is as rewarding as it is a huge responsibility, as you rightly pointed. So there are many discussions online, and Kazakhstan has proclaimed itself as a state that literally listens to their citizens. So we all have to be online on social media, in our accounts. We have to reply and so on. Of course, there are formal procedures whereby citizens can approach us through kind of traditional channels, but there is this expectation from public that you will be almost 24/7 online and then answering your personal Instagram account and so on and so on. So yeah, it's quite challenging sometimes, to be honest, because tourism, unlike oil and gas or rocket science, literally, or banking or anything, seemed quite easy to folks. I mean, to grassroots, and so everybody seems to know tourism well because they've traveled a lot and they know how things
Yep.
run. So yeah, we have this joke that people are all of the people here in Kazakhstan are specialists in soccer and tourism.
I like that. But you know what? That's great because it means they're passionate about the destination, and you don't have an opinion on something unless you care about it, right? So I think that's really interesting to hear. I'd love, very few of my listeners probably know much about Kazakhstan. And so you mentioned that it's between Russia and China, and that when you came to the U.S. on a map, the way the map is set up, Kazakhstan is split on a map on two sides of the world, right? And so I would love to have you give us just the overview of Kazakhstan as a nation and as a tourism destination.
Sure. So Kazakhstan is the ninth largest country in the world. We are sandwiched between Russia and China, and most of the territory was the former bottom of, or actually the bottom of an ancient ocean called Tethys. And the western part of the country has tremendous unearthly landscapes, and then we move from that sea and former bottom of the ocean to desert. So the entire center of the country is a deserted area, and then we go to semi-forest, forest, and to snow-capped mountains, and so it's a very diverse country, both in terms of landscape and in terms of the population. So there are more than 120 different ethnic groups residing in Kazakhstan. It's not just Kazakhs and Russians and Uzbek or any other nations in the region. It's ethnic Greeks, believe it or not. It's ethnic Koreans, the Ukrainians, ethnic Germans, and so on and so on. So that adds, to the diversity of the cuisine, of different cultures and dialects, and so on. We are a relatively young nation. We got our independence in 1991, but the history of the country, the territory, dates back to golden horde of Genghis Khan, because in the 13th century, the great emperor swept the cities of Kazakhstan on his way, and three of his sons, or the territory of Kazakhstan, was split and divided between three of his sons, and it was very interesting how the whole history played out from there, because at some point he was the invader, but then all the descendants from Genghis Khan were actually the rulers. Only the descendants of Genghis Khan could be the rulers, or the Khans that could be in charge of the territory. So a lot of things were happening in the region. It was a big tribal kind of community, and then one of the tribes divided from another and created the statehood back in the 15th century. So it's let's say the statehood is around 600 years, but the true independence, because we had so many different turmoil years when we were under the Russian Empire, then we were part of the USSR. So starting 1991, we became the independent sovereign state, and the major export is oil and gas right now, but we've added tourism to the list of priority areas, because we want to diversify our economy. So right now, Kazakhstan is the largest, both in terms of economy, in terms of size, state of the Central Asia. We are the gateway, basically, to Central Asia. We're very well connected to major global hubs like Dubai, Istanbul, Frankfurt, London, Beijing, Seoul, and so on. So quite easily connected by price affordability. We are named number 2 by the World Economic Forum's Travel and Tourism Development Index. That's largely due to the currency spikes that we experience from now on and then. So when you come with $100 bill, you can buy a hotel, full day meals, and probably admissions to some attractions like museums and so on. So quite affordable, very interesting, very authentic. We inherit a nomadic past. We share it with neighboring regions. Last year we held the World Nomad Games to kind of celebrate our nomadic past. So many things, but in terms of tourism, we concentrate out of this whole diversity of landscapes, of cultures, cuisines. We concentrate on the concept that we adopted 8 years ago, which is dubbed as 4E: eco adventures, ethnic, entertainment, and events. So we've been holding to this strategy for the last 8 years.
Great. So I'm curious, and I guess I ought to correct one of the things I said earlier, because when I said you're a small country, it's in terms of population, not size.
That's true.
You've got the ninth largest country in the world. But I want to talk a little bit about the visitors that you bring, because you're a relatively young tourism destination based on the country's history. And so I'm curious where you've seen the most success. Where do people come from when they come to visit Kazakhstan?
You're right. We're still an emerging destination, although we've been putting a lot of efforts into promoting ourselves. But at some point, due to the pandemic, we kind of stuck at the general awareness stage. So we literally lost two years. But I think we're catching up quite rapidly. So as of now, probably, I would say 80% of our arrivals are still coming from the neighboring states. And probably half of the arrivals are still from major markets, Uzbekistan and Russia. Very similar to the United States, almost half of the visitors are coming from Canada and Mexico. So the rest of the visitors, speaking of international markets, we're looking at China, which is booming. It's Turkey and India. So our focus have been primarily on these markets. We see the growth from the GCC market. We are very well connected to Doha, Qatar, to Dubai. Very recently, we've also got new flights to Saudi Arabia. We see a great spike from there, but the baseline was very low. We started with a few thousand people coming from that area, but it's growing rapidly. And Europe is another target market, and out of European destinations, we're looking at Germany and the UK. Unfortunately, the North American market has been overlooked, mostly due to the absence of direct flights. We'll see. Air Astana, the national carrier, is in discussions with the TSA, and in fact, we had 2 inspections from TSA last year, which confirmed actually the compliance to safety standards and so on. So hopefully we'll have a direct flight and finally start properly marketing in North America, primarily in the United States, because actually the entire North America and some of the South American countries are on the visa waiver list as well.
Okay. And you talked about the United States. You've got an interesting thing that's happened, because in the U.S., the way a lot of people have become familiar with Kazakhstan is actually through a movie, and that a movie that may not necessarily have represented you guys exactly the way that you would like to be represented. Tell me a little bit about the Borat effect and the fact that there's a movie that came out that was entirely satire, but definitely created some perceptions around your country.
Right. Well, it was a double-edged sword in the very beginning, back in 2006. Most of the country, people here got offended, of course, and nobody liked how we were portrayed. And I keep sharing this personal story, how I encountered with Borat. I was crossing the border in JFK and handed my passport to the frontier card, and he started smiling. And of course, I asked him why he was smiling, and he told me about the movie and that he had no idea the country actually existed. He thought it was actually made up. He couldn't believe the real country was used for this sort of mockumentary. Let's call it this way. But it drove a lot of interest, in the North America, and the Google search analytics showed a huge spike interest from North America in Kazakhstan. But I don't think we've reacted well to the opportunity. Actually, we tried to retaliate, and then we started spending money on paid media in New York Times, coming up with all those articles to kind of, in an attempt to overthrow the image portrayed by Borat. But 14 years down the road, I think we got smarter, and in fact, I became a fan of this guy, because out of the blue, we got all this free marketing, and free awareness. And in 2020, when I heard about the sequel coming up, I started nagging people in different agencies like Ministry of Foreign Affairs and everybody else around, telling them, okay, guys, we got to use it this time properly. We have to use this opportunity. And then I was approached by an American living in Kazakhstan, married to a local lady, basically living in Kazakhstan. He's got this great idea. Basically, he shared my interest, my passion to this, and he came up with the idea: why don't Kazakh Tourism onboards this catchphrase of Borat, which is very nice? Why don't we onboard it and use it as a marketing slogan? And then I guess was brave enough to bring this up. Of course, I was afraid I would be thrown stones at, but it went pretty well up until the moment. And in the meantime, we landed an interview with New York Times, and we were really on, full steam. Really wanted to take this whole story out, that Kazakhstan this time round is accepting it, embracing actually this. And the last moment, of course, this whole thing had to be coordinated through at very high offices, and different administrations. And the very last moment, actually, it's in a few hours, our interview with New York Times, and then all of a sudden everything changes, and basically I was left on my own, with the whole idea, because if something went wrong, I would basically lose everything. So it was zero-sum game, I guess, at some point. But we took the chance, and it was a really nice interview that came out in New York Times. So literally next morning we woke up famous. The whole thing got so viral on the Reddit. New York Times got reposted so many times, and then we got over 1 billion of impressions. So by far, this is the most successful and the most cost-effective campaign that I wouldn't probably be wrong if I say that it's by far the most successful campaign ever run by any country.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because there's a lot of really interesting stuff that I think other destinations could learn from your experience there. I think the first thing I would say is it's very rare that a destination gets a second chance with a PR opportunity like there was with Borat, right? And so the first time it happened, the reaction was to retaliate, trying to change the narrative that was coming out about Kazakhstan. And then 15 years later, you get this opportunity to have the same opportunity again, but handle it a completely different way. And so I'd love to know, for the destinations that are listening, what you learned about negative press. And now that you've had these two experiences, where one, you tried to combat it, the other one, you embraced it and used it to amplify your message, what have you learned about negative press and crisis that other destinations might be able to learn from?
Okay. First off, I guess, and it's really hard to achieve, especially in our part of the world, is to almost immediately put the politics aside. That's the hardest part, because of course politics wants to influence everything, the economy, the image, and everything. And well, most of the time it probably works for certain regimes, but I guess 15 years later we were almost completely different people, with younger generation now in service. I mean, in holding different decision-making positions and so on. A lot of people are Western educated. We have this joke that the acronym my friend coined several years ago, that Kazakhs are warm. W is Western educated, A is Asian looking, R is Russian speaking, and M is Muslims. So the predominant religion is Islam here. So we are warm in a way, you know, showing our versatility. So I think that helped us a lot to be able to spot a different perspective, I think. So we put the politics aside first. We took a different stance. We saw a new perspective. We saw a new perspective, and that way we saw a different competitive edge to this.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I also, you talk about the risk that you took, and I'm giving a presentation here in a month on why destinations need to be less risk averse and more willing to take a risk. And you mentioned if this went bad, you could lose everything, right? Including your job and your career. And you kind of bet your own career on this, but it's the most successful campaign that you're aware of that a country's ever had to promote themselves. Talk to me a little bit about evaluating that risk versus the reward and how you made the decision to kind of put it all on the line and do this.
Well, initially, again, it was a huge risk. So I wasn't even supposed to be interviewed. So it was supposed to be my boss, actually. So at that time, I was the deputy chairman, you know. So, but the chairman is the political position, you know. So I was the deputy. I took the risk. I said to my boss, okay, you don't have to risk this, but I put everything on this stake, on this bet. So I guess one thing, I didn't want to let down the people which were engaged. It was a PR agent here in the United States. There were people who were around us, including Dennis Keane and his friend Yermek, who came up, who approached us with this idea. There were these guys who helped us to make these short video clips that were actually part of the campaign. And so a lot of things had been done up until the moment we had to take risk. So A, I didn't want to let people down, and B, I had this hunch, you know, I really I really believed in this. So as I said, since 2006, I was living with the whole thing, and I had crazy ideas, something like, you know, let's install a statue of Borat somewhere in a popular destination, so tourists would take pictures. You know, like, you know, there are many Beatles statues, for instance, around the world, and we do have Beatles as well in one of the popular destinations. So of course, all those crazy ideas didn't materialize. Although I tried to, I would now and then drop a message in Facebook and then start, you know, taking reactions of people. But of course, a lot of people do hate that character, you know, not the actor, but the character. So I didn't risk that one, but with this one, I was willing to take the risk.
I love it. And let's just talk about the results of that campaign a little bit more. And I know that one of the problems that happened is that during that campaign, COVID hit. And so you weren't able to actually feel the tangible results because people weren't allowed to travel. So you got all these impressions. You got a lot of international intrigue as a result. But then COVID kind of killed your ability to collect the results of that campaign. So tell me how that how that affected the future of tourism in Kazakhstan, and then I'd love to know how you plan to continue the momentum now that people can travel.
Okay, so you're right. We were amidst COVID in 2020. We were literally closed a year and a half after and then I think we got rid of PCR test requirement early in 2023 or late 2022. So there were a lot of restrictions. We couldn't truly measure, and in fact, we didn't see the spike of arrivals from that particular market. But it helped us big time to move from the general awareness stage of our destination marketing to regional, I guess, marketing or product marketing. So people would know Kazakhstan, okay, as an umbrella, we have it. And then under that umbrella, we could start promoting particular destinations like Almaty, Astana, and other cities, or we could actually start telling stories about the products that we have and different experiences. But I think now the whole topic is still hot. We do believe because that character keeps appearing in different shows, and it's still there. And I think the next logical step would be to film the next series of this. And if this could happen in Kazakhstan, I think that would make the noise that we need now in order to get into the North American market. Hopefully next year or from 2 years from now, we will have a direct flight, and then probably this will help us open more doors in this diverse source market as the United States, very discerning travelers, educated and affluent. So I think we need more creativity there.
So you are advocating then for Borat 3 to come out and be filmed in Kazakhstan?
I would be happy to entertain this idea and speak with Sacha Baron Cohen and see if that would be something, if that's on his mind as well or not.
I love it. I love it. So, Kairat, to kind of, I guess, as we wrap up this conversation here, I'd love to. You've been doing this for a long time, and what's cool is you've seen a ton of change over the time that you've been working in tourism for Kazakhstan. What are some of the key learnings? And it can be from the Borat experience, or it can be from some of the other work that you've done. What are some of the key learnings that you could pass on to other destination marketers that might help them navigate the challenges that come along with destination marketing?
Sure. I can share a lot about how emerging destinations should act from the very beginning, because of course we made tons of mistakes, and people literally split into different camps. Some were craving for 100% immaculate infrastructure and no marketing up until then, and the rest were saying, no, let's start marketing now, otherwise we cannot bring foreign exchange here, and so on. So in our job, we had to navigate in between two kind of front lines, and trying to appease those infrastructure people and at the same time spend some money on marketing. So my major advice would be to portray and draw actually a clear picture to politicians. Politicians want everything now, the latest tomorrow, better yesterday. So I think the ambitions we had in the very beginning, this was something that came as a roadblock to us almost immediately. We wanted to cover the entire country, which is again the 9th largest country in the world, with a very scarce population, literally scattered around Kazakhstan. And imagine building roads in between two destinations and then having rest areas with no people around. There are still actually, there are many places in Kazakhstan where you could be traveling for hundreds of miles without seeing a settlement, which makes it actually a good destination for solo travel, let's say, after COVID.
Yeah.
So once again, the clear picture and to politicians that you're investing into something that will probably happen in 3, 4, 5 years down the road at its best. Secondly, don't try to hit the stars or the moon. Start with your neighboring markets. That was our mistake too. going straight to WTM, to ITB, starting with long-haul destinations and so on, completely overlooking, neglecting the regional markets here. This is another mistake we had. In terms of product, number 3 advice, don't try to look better than you are, especially now after COVID. No need. The more authentic, the true voice, the better. We're now thinking that all those infrastructure, those empty blank spaces that we have on the map of Kazakhstan that is not covered with proper restrooms or rest areas or roads, that's our advantage. Go with adventure tourism, this kind of thing. So the true product actually is on the surface, and no need to embellish it. Go and sell it at its face value, if I can call it this way. And
Yeah, those are some pretty important takeaways, right? Like, number 1, communicate a clear vision to your political stakeholders. And you know, I would say inflate the long-term vision, deflate the short-term expectations is
Exactly.
probably a great way to look at it. Number 2, don't neglect neighboring markets, and make sure that you're bringing in the people most likely to help you sustain tourism in the short term, right?
Right.
And then number 3, what you said is, don't try to be something you're not. Lean into what you actually are, and you'll find the audience that wants your product.
Exactly. These
I
are
like that. Those are great takeaways.
Three major takeaways. So I can be talking forever about, again, how to be an emergent destination and move from being emerging to established in 8 or 10 years track. Could be faster, but again, there are many intricacies and again, regional and geopolitical things happening around you. So you have to navigate those deep waters carefully.
Yeah. Kairat, I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to have you come on the show. And it's funny, you and I, scheduling wise, have been trying to do this for a long time. So I'm glad we finally made it work. This has absolutely been worth it. And I think our audience has gotten some really valuable learnings from this conversation. So thank you again for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. If people want to maybe learn more about you or learn more about Kazakhstan or the destination, what's the best way for them to do so?
Kazakhstan.travel is the tourism portal, and I'm on LinkedIn. Again, Kairat Sadvakassov, and I'm sure you'll type it somewhere in the
yeah, we'll
announcement.
put the spelling in the show notes.
Right. So I'm in LinkedIn. Please reach out, and if you want to discuss something or you want to learn something about Kazakhstan or about our experience and the road bumps we had. So totally up for discussion and sharing. And I do I do guest lecture in the U.S. Schools, like University of South Carolina, my own alma mater. I'm invited a lot of times to speak to students there. So I'm free. I would have to probably wake up at 3 or 5 a.m. in the morning in order to be in time for your class, but I'm totally for it.
Great. I love it. And I think a lot of people in this industry would benefit from having you come and speak. So maybe we'll revisit that as well. Again, Kairat, thank you so much for taking the time. I think this has been a really great conversation.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks so much.
And thanks everybody for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to leave us a rating or a review. It helps us continue to bring you amazing guests like Kairat. Thanks everybody, and have a great week.